So tell me, Scott, how do you understand affirmative action? Like, tell me, what do you think that is? How does it work?
Simplistic explanation, how I understand it, is you have X number of employees at your company.
Okay.
There has to be a percentage that's marked up for minorities. There has to be
Okay.
a statistic that you can show that you have employed this percentage of minorities, this percentage of blacks, this percentage of Hispanics, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't have to be like, you can't go and find, say, a Hawaiian to fill the shoes for somebody, and that's not a number that they want you to fill. But
Okay.
minority related compared to white, like you can't have a company that's completely all white. I don't know if it's like.
So let me ask another question. So that's a common way of understanding affirmative action. Let's say you're hiring and you have an affirmative action program at your company or institution, and you have candidates, and let's say you have, as you put it, enough whites, but maybe there can be more whites, and then you have not enough blacks for this quota system that you're essentially saying exists. How do you hire? How do you make decisions hiring?
Now that I don't know how the affirmative action would work with that.
Okay.
So in my mind, as say the hiring manager, what I would like to see is the best fit employee, whoever's got the best resume. Now I understand that you're going to see the individual's name, and I think that this is why affirmative action is in place, is because somebody's going to jump to a conclusion and see a name like John Smith versus Osama,
Mohammed.
Saeed,
Yeah,
something like that. So
Sinan.
yeah, Thomas.
Yeah, right? A difference.
So with that said, I don't know how that is going to be, that type of perspective and that type of judgment and that type of decision making is enforced to not be racist upon that judgment.
Sure. So I want to point out that you share, along with many people, a common misunderstanding of affirmative action and how it's used. And I think you're a more open-minded person, but people use affirmative action as a rationale for one common other misunderstanding is that you choose a less qualified minority over a white candidate. That's also another common misunderstanding. So let me explain how affirmative action actually works in general practice. One, a quota system where you reserve a space for a certain number of minority groups is actually illegal under affirmative action. You cannot have a program anywhere in the United States. Yeah, right? Surprising.
Yeah.
You cannot have a program anywhere in the United States where you say, okay, I have 100 employees that I can have, 20% have to be black.
I mean, I'm thinking college universities.
You can't do that. College universities, you cannot have a quota system. It has been deemed unconstitutional, and one of the court cases that I'm going to review with you is one of the reasons for that.
Okay.
The criteria for applying race within the decision has to be what's called narrowly tailored, and we'll get into that a little bit. The other common misunderstanding that people have of affirmative action is that when you have a qualified white candidate and a less qualified black candidate, regardless of whether you have, because you can't have a quota system, is that you're going to choose the black candidate because, oh, I gotta show affirmative action.
I gotta show that I have minorities that work for me.
Right. So that is also illegal. You cannot choose less qualified. You cannot just arbitrarily choose a minority applicant, and we're going to just use black as a default because that is the hot topic right now with the BLM movement. But it goes for Hispanic, any type of Hispanic, Latino, Native American, etc. And you can't do that because it's not narrowly tailored, right? The job qualifications have to be narrowly tailored. And I'm very specific about this because my background's industrial and organizational psychology. And part of our jobs is to make sure that when you're talking about performance, evaluation, hiring decisions, that those are measurable things, that you can narrowly tailor those job requirements so that when you hire someone, you know that they're actually qualified for the job. So you don't want to arbitrarily create impediments. And one of those that's common is like, can you lift 50 pounds? Well, who does that discriminate against if you don't really have to lift 50 pounds? People with disabilities.
People with disabilities, yep. People who can't lift it.
Smaller framed people.
Children.
Definitely discriminates against children in the workplace. So I wanted to go over 4 key court cases, and it's really important to understand how affirmative action works to even understand this bill. And then we can get into the misleading rhetoric that they use to support the yes on this bill. And we can also look at the no on this bill.
Okay.
So in 1996, we passed Proposition 209 to ban it. So just keep that in mind. We've banned this. As a state, 55% or 60% chose to ban affirmative action. So there were 4 key court cases. Well, there's actually multiple, but I'm going to go over 3 key court cases, that had an impact on affirmative action. They all had to deal with universities, because that's the core of this. And the first one was in 1978, and this was California versus Bakke. So the University of California, this guy was trying to get into this program, and I think it was a medical program, and they reserved 16 out of 100 spots for minority applicants, and he said that it was illegal. That's not fair. You can't do that. And he won.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it.
Sandra Day O'Connor said race could be narrowly tailored factor in the admissions process. So one of the things that Sandra Day O'Connor said, this was in 2003, this was what Sandra Day O'Connor said, that sometime in the future, maybe 25 years, that we really won't need policies like this. We won't need affirmative action. So that was almost 25 years ago. This was in 2003. Sandra Day O'Connor said this, and she's not somebody who is against civil rights, right? This was a democratic-leaning, values-wise judge for the most part.
Okay.
And so back in 1978, this said that you can't just do this with applicants. And then in 2003, they had a court case called Bollinger versus Grutter. Grutter was a regent of, Bollinger was a regent of California. And what they said was that diversity is definitely a compelling interest. So the reason why we have affirmative action is because there was people who were qualified for work, and companies, especially unions and labor, construction, were like, nah, bro.
Juarez isn't as good as Smith.
Yeah, right? You had legit discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they have affirmative action is like, look, if you have qualified black applicants, you have an affirmative action to hire them because diversity is in the interest of your institution. And they said that in 2003, that is a legitimate interest of the university. They can choose. If they have 2 candidates, I'm sorry, white person who is suing us. If they have 2 candidates, they're looking at both of you, and both of you succeed, and we only have 1 spot, we're choosing the minority. Because we've got 75% of you and only 2% of them. It's a compelling interest for us to increase diversity at this campus. That same day, they made another ruling on another affirmative action case, very rare. And they said that in Gratz versus Bollinger, same University, California region. Actually, this is not University of California. This is Michigan, your home state. It's University of Michigan. The university lost their case because in the undergrad admission process, you apply for the university. You're Scott. You checked yourself off as a white male. I checked myself off as a minority. Say I'm black, and I get an additional 20 points. So there's a point-based system, and I get an additional 20 points just for saying I'm a minority. Well, you get 12 points for having a perfect SAT score. Does that sound narrowly tailored to you?
Wow.
It's arbitrary, right?
Yeah.
So they lost that court case. So on one end, they won because diversity is a compelling interest, but it has to be, again, narrowly tailored. So I just want to pause there. What do you think I just told you more about affirmative action you probably ever thought before, but I know this stuff because of my background.
It's a bit hard to digest right away. There's a lot of questions. I mean, this point system for one,
yeah,
it's who came up with that, and what's the logic behind it? What does it benefit? I mean, I guess I don't know how that's gonna reflect on paper with real statistics too.
Yeah.
Looking at high schoolers' diploma and their grades and their level of education, coming into college, whether that they have like community college before or something like that for that admission for that program. So, yeah, man, I mean, it sounds like discrimination. Straightforward, it sounds like discrimination.
Like the point system,
Yeah,
or
the points, arbitrarily putting points on races, like
yes,
so.
that's exactly right. So to answer how they come up with those point systems, it's actually great that they come up with a point system, because what they're supposed to do is use a multitude of factors to qualify you as a candidate. The problem was that they used this multitude of factors and then like, and plus 20 points.
Gotta
Right?
get that curve.
Right? So it's like, okay, what's your economic situation?
Yeah.
What are your performance in
Do
school?
you come from a 2-family house or a 2-parent household, things like that?
Right.
Do you qualify for a grant? Do you qualify for a scholarship? What's your academic history?
Yep.
Have you been incarcerated? I don't know if they can even look at that. Probably not. I don't know.
That could be part of your story. It could be something like you
Could
were
be.
incarcerated and you
Yeah.
redeemed yourself. And that's part of what gives you a boost to score. Like, we need to help this person get saved. Or it could
Maybe.
negatively affect you. Who knows?
Yeah,
That's
maybe.
that's one of the social factors that isn't GPA. It isn't SAT. Isn't the hard factor.
I don't remember if I had to write a letter to get into college. I don't think I did.
These are
That seems archaic now.
Well, it just depends on the program as well. Some prestigious schools are definitely going to have
Sure.
letters of recommendation, maybe letters of intent. It just depends on how competitive the program is that you're applying to. Undergrad is, maybe University of Michigan doesn't have those factors, but they probably look at a transcript of things that
Yeah.
you've listed as
Okay, so.